As far as I'm concerned, as long as that same respect and recognition is not shown toward every one of our people in this country, it doesn't exist for me. And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
You already know when the guest comes back for a third time, you already know it's a shutdown. Welcome back to the Malcolm Effect, to someone I'm honored and proud to call my teacher and my real life friend. Welcome back, Deej.
Thank you so much for having me. You always do these grand introductions, and I always get super nervous.
No, it's true though, honestly. The amount of people were telling me, please bring back Deej, please. I'm like, don't worry. You know, Deej, again, she's very difficult to get a hold of. It's not easy.
I'm a very difficult person to get a hold of.
Exactly. Now, but thanks for coming back so much. We're gonna talk.
Always.
I have to ask, the discourse moves along so quickly, Deej. So I have to ask you, as a black man, do I have privilege or not?
Not good. Honestly, I think it's so funny because privileged discourse, I think, has come to dominate politics. And I understand why. It gives a very simplistic analysis of just how the social relation, how various kind of identities and how various groups are organized. But the more you sort of delve into privilege as a concept, the more it kind of becomes rendered useless, especially the way in which we use it nowadays, right? I think assigning privilege just indiscriminately on particular bodies by virtue of the bodies existing as they are is just incredibly meaningless. And so to the question, as a black man, do you have privilege? I guess my sort of analysis goes, well, it depends. In what context are we speaking, right? In what conditions are we speaking under? Because there are various sort of empirical evidences that tell us that although we come to think of black men within the group of sort of the black community as being the dominant, being the patriarch, there's so much information that's counter to that. And I've had the absolute pleasure this week with engaging with a relatively controversial figure, Dr. Thomas Curry. And it's been interesting for me. And I think I've been on this incredible journey whereby a lot of my ideas, a lot of the way in which I think, especially about the notions of gender and sex, have been incredibly challenged. And that challenge started here, actually. It started with us engaging with Dr. Joy James. It started with Dr. Joy James's articulations of, her own shifts away from a black feminist politic and thinking through what it means to sort of reimagine a politics of gender. So that's kind of started me on this journey about thinking about gender in a more material way, in a more complex way, thinking about gender outside of the sort of liberal fascination or the liberal feminist fascination with a sort of interactive politics that says that there are two main class antagonisms, and that's of womanhood or womanhood or femaleness, and manhood or maleness, and thinking how the notion of patriarchy as the sort of large structural antagonism becomes rendered almost just inapplicable when we think about race, when we think about imperialism, when we think about what it means to be a racialized subject. So that's the sort of journey I've been on, and it's been
it's
a
funny.
wild journey.
It's funny you're talking about your journey, because again, I just pulled up your tweet, and this is what I was going to start today with. This is me quoting you. It was uncomfortable and felt like everything I knew about gender was in conflict, but it was such an important lesson. When we are guided by the materiality, we engage in truth beyond mystification. What was going through your head when you wrote that?
Well, I was thinking about just how, so I was probably I've always called myself a Marxist. I've always been sort of Marxist adjacent. I've always been a socialist, all those things kind of since my sort of political introduction when I was around 16. But beyond that and before that, I was a feminist, right? I was raised to think about myself as a woman who was liberated and empowered, who, had features of strength and wanted to engage in a politics that liberated all women, because women and the oppression that women face was the primary locus for all the pain and suffering in the world. And it became, and I guess I was sort of that was just part of the tradition in which I was brought up in. That was my scholarly tradition. Much of my work was focused initially on Black girls and on intimate partner violence, because I had taken in this idea that violence the women experience was simply the condition of the fact that men existed in the world, right? And so that had been the politics that had basically grounded me. And over the last year, I began to think more critically, open my mind a little bit more. And I think more so than anything, I began talking to men that I'm friends with, men that I care about, men that are in my family, and thinking through their
Mm-hmm.
experiences. I think back to last year when my little brother, he's 13 at the time actually, was basically like robbed in front of my mum's flat. At 13 years old, a bunch of boys beat him up, threatened him with a knife. And that was an experience
Yeah.
that he had.
Wow.
And I started to think about, well, I grew up in a community where that's such a normalized part of your existence, right? Like black boys
Mm-hmm.
expect violence. And then I thought about, well, as a woman, I've always thought of like being on the streets, walking home at night, all of that things as things that I fear because I'm a woman. But I know
Mm-hmm.
so many young boys who have those same fears,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're not articulated as such. They're not oftentimes understood as such. But what does it mean to be 13, to be 14? And by virtue, and it's important to recognize this, that intersection of your manhood and your race and your class, that you can experience violence. And how is
So
that
where does
separate? How is
yeah.
that an antagonism to the violence that I experience? And how is it their fault?
Absolutely. I mean, the problem is, I feel like I too am on a continuous journey, and I'm always doing this in public as well. It's always good to be in dialogue and think aloud through certain things, because up until now, I was under the impression that radical, quote unquote, radical feminism in all its various waves posited category of woman as always oppressed. Continuously, and category of man. So when they say things like as the oppressor no matter what, and it never accounted for or for race or even class, for example. So when I hear things like, but the issue is, I kind of felt that I didn't want to engage in reactionary takes, because I found the people speaking about this and did it very, quite badly, was the likes of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
The reason why the world is the way the world is now is because men have been emasculated, all that kind of nonsense. I didn't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. But then I saw the things, okay, TJ Curry is speaking about, and this might be a bit controversial, but I do like TJ Curry a lot. But a lot of the time, I do think, maybe put it like this: if you judge the scholar by their adherents, you might not like the scholar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I honestly, I had a similar journey, and I met Dr. Curry, and I told him, I was like, look, the first thing I did when I joined Twitter was block you because I was like, why is this person here? Like everything about I knew about black feminism told me that you must be misogynistic, right? And I
Yeah,
think this is the thing, and I'm going to make this like really, really useful and critical intervention. If we judge anything by its mobilizations, by the worst types of people, then
yeah,
we're gonna get rid of all types of scholarships, right? We're both sort of
true.
like in the left umbrella, which I problematize. We're Marxists. If we were to be judged
Yeah,
by the worst thing a white fucking reactionary Marxist has said, we have to let go of that
true,
theory, right? The
true.
problem, and I think I suffered from this too with engagement with Thomas Curry's work, is that many people aren't actually reading him. I've
Yeah.
actually never seen someone take a direct citation, direct quotation from his work and analyze it on the basis of what he's actually offering, right? You don't see that.
Hmm.
I was being reactionary, and my friend said, read the text. And I'm only sort of like 3 chapters in, but my
Yeah.
God, has it shifted my perspective. He's not
Wow.
antagonizing anyone. What he does
Oh,
in the
wow.
first instance, as far as I've gone, is he problematizes the notion of gender. And guess who he uses to problematize the notion of gender? He uses Sylvia Wynter, a black
Winter.
woman who has
Yeah.
literally
Hmm.
been incredibly central to our ideas about how we even think about the project of humanism.
Yeah.
Right? He mobilizes Fanon sociogeny, which is an analysis that doesn't and rejects that essentializing thing that we do, right? That pathologizing
Hmm.
thing that we do to issues like blackness and maleness, and actually says,
Yes.
let's think about how society creates these sort of malleable entities. That's a much better and more astute analysis of understanding the conditions of black manhood than is engaging in a
Mm.
reactionary and actually racist. And like that's the thing that was shocking. The category of gender, as we know it, is embedded in a racist logic. It's embedded in a logic that is actually antagonistic to the subject of black manhood.
Wow.
Gender comes about through through white women's theorization of their experiences using the black man as the experimental tool. He evidences
Mm-mm.
this, and I swear to you, man, you need to pick up that man's book because it's a historical analysis, and we're Marxists, right? Historical analysis with citations, with empirical
Wow.
evidence, right? And I sat there and I said to him, I was really worried that this talk was going to have misogyny, but it had no misogyny. And this is the thing that was fascinating to me. Even the critiques of Black feminism that people oftentimes blame him for doing, I don't think that's what he's doing at all,
Okay.
right? He's critiquing Black feminist origins in a theory of gender that is inherently racist. And he's saying to them, if you care about Blackness as a whole,
Yes.
why aren't you more interrogative? Why aren't you more critical of the theories that you are mobilizing, that you're embedding within your politic, right? That's what he's offering to them.
Yeah.
He's saying, how is this okay, right? Like, how is this enough? Why aren't we open to thinking through even just this concept of gender and its racist and historical origins? Why are we so accepting of it? And then it
So
makes
then
me then think
yeah,
back to our conversation with
Dr.
Dr.
Joy.
Joy James, who explicitly said that she no longer calls herself a Black feminist, because any discipline, any scholarship that becomes so welcomed by the state needs to be understood as what? Inherently carceral, inherently problematic.
Absolutely. So my question then to you then is it that the category of gender itself is defunct, or we don't, or it's inherently antagonistic to Blackness as a whole?
Well, in the first instance, yes, because it has its origins in a deeply racist organization of
Possession.
society.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think once you see the evidence, and the thing that was so profound is, my God, that man knows his theory and knows his history, and he was just throwing citations at us, like, and he was quoting verbatim what these
Wow.
white social anthropologists, philosophers, social scientists, etc., were saying.
Hmm.
Like, he offered that to us. Like, this is not me. I'm not saying this person is racist. They are telling you they are. Read their
Wow.
words. And he actually mobilizes Sylvia Wynter's notion of genre as a
Hmm.
far more useful analysis of what we think of as gender. And I've not gotten so far as maybe unpacking that, so I'm not going to kind of talk too much about it. But in just the origins of gender, I think we need to be more critical of, right? And especially the origins of gender kind of within the imperial core as an imperial tool in and of itself. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking here to a conversation I had with Yara literally just a few days ago in the DMs, where we saw like a rad femme, I think, who
Oh,
was
I
a
saw that.
Marxist,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about essentially that, like Palestinian men were
Yeah.
irreconcilably just, harmful because they were men. That I feel like we have to be really careful of those types of politics, because those types of politics are part of that sort of, imperial imagination of what a racialized and colonized man is. Now,
The
Curry
brute.
has this
Yeah.
Curry has this fantastic sort of thing he said, and it's literally stuck with me. And I said the same thing to Yara, and she was blown away, where she was like, well, we
Hmm.
have to think about the way sort of white womanhood or white feminists at the time came to conceive of a racialized patriarchy, right? In their
Hmm.
articulations of patriarchy, white patriarchy was a civilized patriarchy. It was a good patriarchy, right? But racialized
Mm.
patriarchy, black male patriarchy, was deformed. It was uncontrollable. It was beastly.
Mm.
So it should be more feared,
Yeah. So
right?
okay. So the question, I just want to make a comment here. A comment here. So again, I'm not. This is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I'm only. I think since this podcast is to kind of speak on what's going on. Where do you stand now with the works of like someone like Bell Hooks? Then.
So I was hoping you were going to bring this up,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up, because honestly, like, I could not think of myself as a Black feminist without crediting everything I knew to Bell Hooks.
Hmm.
Right? Bell Hooks
Yeah.
was important, foundational. One of the first books I loved was Yearning.
Yeah.
And the wildest thing about Yearning is Thomas, Professor Curry, literally provides this quote from Yearning, which was the most racist, most vile, most, you
Oh
know,
my god.
sexually essentialist, brutally violent thing I've ever read about Black men in that. And I literally just,
Oh
my
my
heart
god.
broke.
Sorry.
And I can't remember the exact quote, but it was literally, and I was like, how is this okay? And
Mm.
he then showed us this quote from Yearning in conjunction with something a white feminist had said earlier on.
Oh
And
wow.
so do you see how this is literally just a copy and paste, just a reorganization of the words, but pretty much a similar instance?
Mm. But when you speak about gender-based violence, is there not a specificity that must be recognized between those who identify as men, those who identify, or those who are read as men, those who are read as women?
So this is something that myself and Annie talked about, right?
Hmm.
So if we're going to take gender on its own terms, then we cannot
Yeah.
disentangle gender from the notion of patriarchy. We cannot
Okay.
then disentangle patriarchy from the notion of the nuclear family, because actually, instead of this kind of reactionary assumption that patriarchy is simply the formation of a antagonism between male and female,
Yeah.
patriarchy is actually a system of organization around the family,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Which is it's significant. It's significant. And it's significant because, and this is another thing that we need to think about, is that if we look at the notion of gender, or we look at the notion of patriarchy under this lens of the nuclear family, then we have to broaden how we think about sort of or the violences that happen within a sort of patriarchal family nuclear structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. In almost any racial category, you will tend to find that there is an over representation of women who are the victims of intimate partner violence, and the men are being the perpetrators, right? That tends to be how the sort of thing follows. But if you stretch your understanding of patriarchy to include children,
Yep.
and if we think about the difference, a similar difference we make in terms of the physicality between men and women, and the
Yeah.
power imbalance between men and women, between parents and children, what we find
Mm-hmm.
in that instance is that women are oftentimes, more so than even when we look at the sort of intimate partner violence statistics between man and woman,
Yeah.
overrepresented in the categories of abuse against children. White
Essentially,
women
what you're.
have the
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
white women actually, as a category, as a grouping, have some of the highest rates of violence against children.
Mm.
But is there a politic we see mobilizing that deems white womanhood as inherently violent or antagonistic to childhood? Have you seen that yet?
Mm. No.
I haven't
Essentially, what you're
either.
saying, that patriarchy, it doesn't care who reproduces it as long as it's reproduced.
Exactly.
Mm.
And so we need to understand the notion of sort of manhood as being a purveyor of that violence as simply a matter of categorization, simply a matter of power, not
Yeah.
necessarily an essentialist, as is the Radfem doctrine, sort of
Yeah.
position of men.
And it's true, because look what happens when you see, like, Afghanistan, for example. You saw it. Look,
Mhm.
oh, think about the girls and the women.
Think about the girls and think about the women.
Women,
Right?
or we saw.
Imperialism requires this analysis of patriarchy. The notion that imperialist feminism has to be understood as a project of colonization, racialization, and a project of patriarchy. But why do we not
Mhm.
see imperialist feminism as a project of patriarchy? If we understand patriarchy as a system of domination and rule embedded within a sort of capitalistic structure and embedded within
Yeah.
white supremacy, how does imperialist feminism, liberal feminism, radical feminism not operate as an imperialistic tool, as such a patriarchal tool?
Exactly. And then you get the takes that you mentioned earlier on, when now, what's it, a Palestinian boy cannot be the victim of gender-based oppression because he's a man, even if the soldier at the IDF is a woman soldier. And I was like, I don't know. Please help me unpack it. How do we get to this point?
I mean,
Like, how do
this
we
is the
get to
thing.
this
It
point?
doesn't make sense, right? Because, like, if you take a lot of these analysis on their own terms,
Yeah.
right, they become completely illegible, or they lie, or they misconstrue when you want to stretch their own analysis. And this is the thing I have with privilege politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Privilege politics oftentimes assesses that within any given circumstance, right, someone has privilege over another, except when it comes to like a system in which there's a power imbalance between womanhood and manhood, and then the
Yeah.
manhood becomes to blame, right? So let me give you an
Mm-hmm.
example of this. In that talk as well, a friend of mine put their hand up and was like, oh, well, you know, it's because Curry mentioned the sort of like, specifically like the violence that young black boys face, right? The sexual violence young black boys face, and how we need to
Yes.
understand it as a form of gendered violence, right? Because black boys
Yeah.
have a sexual debut, which is oftentimes between the ages of, I think it was 9 to 12, right? That's
Yeah.
statutory rape in any other circumstance,
Think
right?
about Boosie.
My
Happened with Boosie,
Right,
back to his
exactly.
sons.
And then,
Yep.
well, this is the thing. And then my friend was like, well, but isn't it kind of men's own fault? Because men oftentimes don't articulate their own experiences of sexual violence and sexual violence. They view it as this sort of celebratory, as this sort of like, you
Mm,
know,
rite of
emancipatory thing,
passage.
like as a show of
Yeah.
a rite of passage, a show of their manhood. And I was like, in what other category does a victim, not understanding that they're a victim, become mobilized as a privilege? How is that privilege?
Wow.
Right? So we're
Wow.
theorizing young black boys. I'm not even talking about men. I'm young black boys over representation in the instances of statutory rape as an effect of male privilege.
Wow.
How is that not terrifying? How does that not disgust us? And then the thing becomes for me, at what point that is a traumatized man, a traumatized boy, become a man and become irredeemable? At what point does his trauma, his childhood trauma, not become recognizable as a trauma in and of itself? At what point does his victimhood no longer become a victimhood? And who decides this?
Mm.
And
But
that
then my question,
deeply troubles me.
it's not even a but. I can hear what people might say. And, because think about it, so far, all we've ever known, and you said that you prefaced it in the beginning of this podcast, we've known, women are the most oppressed, there's a system of patriarchy, and no matter where it's found, women are seen in the bottom. And, again, and then we have, okay, there's some pushback against it. We had all the reactionaries talk about it, Jordan Peterson types, etc., etc. So now, what would you say, someone who's, as your scholarship, I know you're interested in gender and blackness, what is your project now then? Is it that we have to just highlight the plight that black men go through? Again, I don't see that either being as a useful project either, or useful endeavor either.
Well, I think we have to be honest. We have to be guided by the material at any given instance. And we have to
Hmm.
look at what the empirical data is telling us, right? And we have to allow for the recognition that a lot of these sort of liberal politics of sort of reactionary privilege discourse and identitarian politics aren't offering to us the deep messiness of the truth,
Mm.
right? Because the truth is messy, because the real
Yeah,
is messy, because the material sometimes isn't as neatly coordinated as we need it to, right?
yeah,
We have to do
yeah.
the work of understanding that part of engaging in an emancipatory politic is not allowing the simple to guide us, is allowing and believing in the emancipation for everyone, right? Even
Yeah,
if, even if black men are these irredeemable, which I completely disagree with, oppressive
yeah.
forces, what do we do with them then? Because what the state is
True.
doing with them is something we're apparently, against as abolitionists, because the state is incarcerating them and essentially eradicating them en masse. If you look at their
Hmm.
in the context of America, the black male life expectancy, and I think Rennie posted this figure, so you can probably like add sort of,
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
yeah, black male life expectancy in the US is lower than men in freaking war zones. That should terrify
exactly.
us.
Of course.
That isn't saying that, and I saw this tweet and I really started to think about just how we understand words, because there's something about how we use language that's becoming incredibly meaningless. Well, black men need to be held accountable. How?
Yeah.
And what is accountability to you? Is mass death not accountability? Is mass incarceration not accountability? And what is our politics, right? How is
Mhm.
an emancipatory politic more concerned with people being accountable, which is an individualistic politic, than ridding the conditions that allow for all of these violences to exist?
Mm. What I'm thinking about though, this is a bit slight off topic, but it connects. Remember your tweet when people got so upset about the state
Yeah,
taking people's passports
honestly,
away?
that was my villain origin story. I swear to God. That was my villain origin story, because I was already feeling a type of way. And then the way people came at me, I was like, wait, hold on, hold on, hold on. I didn't say anything radical. I just happened to
Yeah.
include black men in there. And people said the same thing. They just did not specifically mention black men. So what is going on? That was my villain origin story.
Yeah. At that point, you say, "This is it. I'm done. This is all
This
like
is
castle
it.
feminism now."
This is it. Nah, I was literally like, black feminism is lost, because it was black feminists coming or I don't think they're black feminists, right? Because again, you saw this in my conversation with Joy. I'm still really trying hard to redeem this thing that was so central to who and what I am, right? I'm
It's
still
funny you said
trying
this.
hard
Yeah.
to reclaim it.
I was speaking to one of my mentors, Dr. Layla Brown. She calls herself Pan African feminist, yeah. And I was asking her the same question. Oh, do you think it's time to give up the label Black feminist or Pan African feminist or however you want to label yourself, feminist? She was like, no. She goes, why should we? And I think exactly what you were saying. Why should we leave it for it to be cannibalized? You know what I mean? By the
Mhm.
neoliberals. So, but where do you stand with it now? You trying to
Well, I
redeem it
think
still? You try.
I'm trying to redeem it because it means something to me, right? And I think
Hmm.
within the black feminist politics, there is still a politics of care. There is still a politics that thinks through womanhood in a complex way. And there is still a
Hmm.
politic that has articulated the experiences of sort of black familyness and, what patriarchy means within the black family. And so I said this to Corey, like, I'm not probably ever going to stop thinking of myself as a black feminist, because I think it's an inherently important politics for a lot of people. But then my,
Hmm.
my response to sort of black male studies is that, okay, I understand that people think of it as a reactionary sort of critique, but
Yeah.
a lot of people who think of it as a reactionary critique maybe have not engaged with it. So for me, as a
Okay.
good feminist, if someone says there's a blind spot within your theoretical analysis, there's a blind spot in the way you've conceptualized the relations between men and women, I don't take that as an antagonism. The things
Okay.
that Curry problematizes about Black feminism's sort of, failures can be resolved if we choose to expand our analysis and choose to expand or engage with his source material with honesty and with a want to actually know more.
Hmm.
Curry isn't a reactionary. The man has read more feminist theory than anyone I know.
Wow.
No, simply like you can't. I mean, this is the thing that's mad. It's like you can talk about people who don't read things and are antagonistic, and sometimes people's critiques are like, "Well, Black feminism has said it." And he's like, "No, Black feminism has said it, but it said it wrong, and here's why." And he's like, "Here's the empirical evidence." That's what he actually does. Here's the
Well
empirical
then,
evidence that shows that the thing that you're trying to say has a causal relationship, has a correlative relationship with the different phenomena, but you articulate it as having a causal relationship. And by articulating it as having a causal relationship, you've created this category of manhood that is irredeemable.
mm, I won't say any names, but then the discourse that ensued after the recent one with our friends, our AP friends. But what
I
did you
feel like
make
I
of
always
that
have to
discourse
qualify.
then?
I still, me, I still have a lot of time for AP because my God, some of them write beautifully. But anyway,
No, no seriousness, dude, you're very fair though. You're very fair. I gotta give you that. But carry on,
well, I
please.
think I try to take everything on its own terms, right? So if
Hmm.
if Afro-pessimism views itself as a meta critique
Yeah.
and specifically a meta critique of Marxism, then I should take it on its own terms, right? I think it does the job
Okay.
of critiquing Marxism not right because there are substantial critiques of Marxism that come from a Black radical tradition, and I think their critiques maybe do not line up as well as they think they do. But then I'm allowing them to have that space, and I engage, and I read Balderson, I read Spillers, I read all these people
Yeah.
because I've wanted to engage with what the actual base of the argument was.
Hmm.
Same thing with Curry, right? I was being reactionary. I was like, "You're a misogynist," and my friend was like, "How are you calling something misogynistic without engaging with the source material?" And so I started to engage in the source material, and I was like, "Okay, you are not actually antagonistic. You are just saying that you've missed something here, and actually the conclusions you've come to don't always neatly apply." And I swear, like, it's bizarre, but he says it in the kindest way possible. He really does. Like, he actually
Oh,
does.
really?
He really does. He's actually so nice. Ask anyone who's ever engaged with him. I know lots of Black women who've literally come out and said in their formations of their like development as scholars in times where they've even struggled. Someone I'm writing a paper with was like she's writing on Black manhoods and she's using Black feminism. And
Okay.
Curry didn't tell her that she shouldn't do that. He actually spoke to her and they engaged and like offered her citations and other things that she could use to develop her analysis. But demonization.
As always is the case on the TL anyway. So ultimately, what's the name of his book, by the way? So for
Man
the listeners.
not, my God. And it's a really good God. And this is the thing, it's like you can't, and this is probably going to be one of the most controversial thing I'm going to say in the space. I genuinely think within the field of sort of Black scholarship, Black philosophical scholarship,
Hmm.
I've not read work that has moved me like this since Fanon. And that's a big deal.
Mm-mm.
I swear, I know, I swear. Just read the book. Read the book.
Man Not
This
by
is the
TJ Curry, yeah?
yeah, this is the end of my my Black feminist anything. But I swear to God, I swear, and I'll throw my hands up and say I've not read work this good since Fanon.
You hear that? You heard it here first.
And I took a bunch of people to me to his talk, and everyone left that talk shaken,
Really?
shaken.
What,
Like the
what
man
what
is
was it? What was
clear.
it? Yeah,
Like
what was it?
it's just like when someone provides you so much evidence and analysis
Yeah.
that is like complex but accessible,
Hmm.
right? Backed up with evidence, not antagonistic, just saying, like, just read this, just read what this person is saying, and now look at the evidence. It's simple in the best way, right? It gets to the point
Hmm.
and it's a wealth of evidence. And I think that's the thing that is really, really beautiful and wonderful about his work is that he doesn't just talk, like, he's a trained epidemiologist. Do you know what I mean? Like, he looks at
Oh,
stats
right.
as like, yes, the man is a trained epidemiologist. Like, he looks at stats and offers you the analysis of the stats, and he's not just collecting this primary data, he's taking the data from the sources that claim to be sort of objective, etc., etc. He uses the same data sets that feminists often, or white feminists oftentimes use to argue particular positions, and presents it correctly and offers a counter argument. And I think the
Okay.
main thing I left is that he didn't say like, I have all the answers. He says that it's actually not okay to pretend as if we have all the answers, that things are completely neatly identifiable, when oftentimes all you're doing is grouping a category to get a category of people together without understanding the context of the sort of like experiences or phenomena that you're trying to articulate, and saying that, well, this is truth. And he's like, that's not truth, that's not actually science, that's not anything, that's just grouping people together and saying all these people think the same, all these people behave the same. That's not true.
Yeah. Well, I see it right now. The man not, race, class, genre, and the dilemmas of black manhood. People need to read it as Deej has recommended it. And if she's going on about, listen, she said he hasn't moved her since Fanon. I'm going to be putting that on Twitter today. But okay.
And
Now,
honestly,
Karen.
because he uses a Fanonian analysis. Like, he uses
Yeah.
a sociogenic analysis, which is a Fanonian analysis, right? People will have you thinking that Fanon's theories are simply like a psychoanalytic theory, but he goes beyond that. And then especially his articulation of black manhood. Like, you know, Fanon was a scholar of black manhood actually first. If you want to put all cards on the table. And so to see someone do that work and be intellectually like just incredibly, like, the humility is outstanding, but also welcoming to a position that disagrees with him. Welcoming, and I even said, I did the same thing I did with Joy, where I was like, can we save black feminism? Can we save, well, specifically, and this is the thing, his antagonism isn't even to black feminism so much as it is to intersectionality as sort of how it's oftentimes thought of, right?
And what did he say?
Intersectionality, well, like, it fails on its own premise, and it actually misconstrues the sort of complexity of the intragroup, right? Like, that's his analysis of intersectionality, thinking through its history, its genealogy within the disciplines it emerges out from, and also taking it on its own sort of like terms.
Yeah.
And in that, like, a lot of things people say they're doing that is intersectional is not at all in the first instance, but an intersectionality in its actual own terms offers a sort of like critical analysis that it actually oftentimes can't truly engage in, because of its need oftentimes to engage in a privilege politics that says you can analyze every intragroup within the community, but if you analyze manhood and you don't just ascribe manhood as privilege, you're doing something wrong. But that's problematic.
Absolutely. With the kind of time that we have left, and we can talk forever, but I want to take it back to the basics. That was, again, a masterclass. Once again, thank you. I've learned
Hardly
so
a
much.
masterclass. No, you need to get Curry onto this. I swear, like,
Have you got connected with him? Hook me
I
up
do.
if you have.
I can DM him, and like, honestly, like, you need to, because it will change. It will. I was just like, I just need to go, and I feel like I have to go and read all these black feminist texts again, right? I think Rennie is also a great person to follow. Rennie's been so like important in my own journey, because I spoke to Rennie, and once I spoke to Rennie, I understood this people who are not trying to antagonize anyone. They're just doing an analysis, right? We're scholars first. We're scholars, right? We're scholars, and we're also people that are concerned with the emancipation of black people. So part of that work is doing that rigorous intellectual and critical challenging. I think anytime a politic becomes a dogma, then we failed. The point, and part of why I'm trying to, I guess, save black feminism, is that black feminism shouldn't become a separatist or a neoliberal politic of individualism. Black feminism should not become dogmatic, because black feminism isn't an identity. Black feminism, or the kind of revolutionary black feminism that I'm concerned with, is a feminism of emancipation. It's a feminism of liberation. It's a feminism that understands patriarchy as a project that conscripts us all into its logics and conscripts us all into its harms, right? We're all kind of guilty of maintaining patriarchy because of what capital and because of white supremacy forces us to do. To say anyone who experiences the antagonisms of, you know, capitalist patriarchy benefits from it is too simplistic, you know, or benefits from it to the point of irredeemability. When we look materially, they are oftentimes one of the most discriminated against, the ones met with the most violence. I don't think it's a good analysis at all.
And I think we're gonna leave it there. You know, I had more questions. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
No. It's not about time, but you know what it is. I think I want to have you on again, because I would love to do maybe like what a material analysis of gender even looks like as another separate episode. But I know that can take a long time. Whew. Well, thank you so much, Deej. I hope everyone gets the book, and everyone follow Deej, please. Follow Deej,
and also, please don't be too mad at me. Or don't even
Don't be
chat me.
too mad. Nah,
I'm too
if you're
old.
mad at Deej,
I
come and
don't
at me.
care. I don't even
Come and
care
at
anymore because
me. Anyone's got beef with Deej, let them at me, yeah? I'm
I'm
here, innit? I'm the
screaming.
vanguard.
I'm
Now, but in
screaming.
all honesty, again, listen, Deej is a dope. Please, if you want to book her, hit her up, man. Hit her up. There's so much to learn. Thank you so much, man. You listen to the Malcolm Effect with Mama Do. Please like, comment, subscribe. Be that on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Until next time, peace out.